A 42-year-old man walks into a coffee shop alone, orders a black coffee, sits by himself, opens his laptop. Society looks at him and sees loneliness. He looks at himself and sees freedom. Most people talk about men over 40 as if they ended up single, like it was an accident or a failure. The truth is the opposite. More men today are choosing to stay single on purpose, and not out of fear, but out of clarity. Because something happens when a man hits his 40s. He's lived enough life, he's made enough mistakes, he's seen what peace feels like and what chaos costs. And he realizes that being single isn't a downgrade. It's the first time in his life he actually gets to choose with experience, not impulse. This isn't about blaming women or hating relationships. It's about understanding why so many men are finally choosing themselves. Their time, their peace, their freedom, their purpose. And if you stay until the end, you'll see exactly why that choice is stronger than ever. So here are 15 reasons men over 40 are choosing to stay single. Not because they gave up, but because they leveled up. 1. They've seen what divorce can do. Most men over 40 aren't afraid of marriage, they're aware of it. They've watched friends lose houses, retirement accounts, businesses, and years of progress because a relationship went wrong. Not out of bitterness, out of experience. The mistake younger men make is assuming marriage automatically creates stability. Men over 40 know better. They've seen the real numbers, the court outcomes, the emotional fallout. They know how the system works and they plan accordingly. This isn't about fear, it's about risk management, something mature men excel at. The upgrade is simple, they don't rush commitment anymore, they protect their assets. They think with their long-term future, not short-term feelings. They choose slowly, intentionally, and on their terms. And the payoff? Control, freedom, a sense of safety that doesn't depend on someone else's behavior. A man who's seen what divorce can do isn't anti-relationship, he's just not gambling his future on hope alone. And once a man understands the cost of choosing wrong, he starts valuing something even more important. 2. Peace is more valuable than partnership. In your 20s and 30s, you're taught that being in a relationship automatically makes life better. More excitement, more purpose, more meaning. But by 40, most men have lived enough life to know something deeper. Peace is priceless. Men over 40 don't avoid relationships because they fear drama. They avoid them because they've tasted peace and they're not willing to trade it away lightly. The quiet of your own home, the routine that actually works, the freedom to think and build without emotional turbulence. It's not loneliness, it's stability. What younger men don't realize is that companionship doesn't fix chaos. Now they understand the opposite. The wrong relationship creates more chaos than it solves. Now they know better. If someone can't match the emotional environment a man has built on his own, he doesn't invite them in. Not out of bitterness, out of self-respect. The result? A life without constant conflict. A home that feels like a sanctuary. A mind that stays sharp and steady. Once a man experiences true peace, he stops negotiating for anything less. Because after peace becomes a priority, another realization shows up. One that changes how he sees people entirely. 3. They don't fall for the first impression act anymore. When men are younger, they mistake chemistry for compatibility. Attraction feels like alignment. A good first date feels like potential. And the early version someone presents feels like the truth. But after 40, men see through that instantly. They've lived long enough to recognize the pattern. People perform at the beginning. They reveal later. It's not cynical, it's experienced. They've seen the difference between someone's dating personality and their real one, between early effort and long-term consistency. What men used to believe was that the first 3 months mattered most. Now they know the opposite. The first 3 months often matter least. That's when everyone is on their best behavior. So they change the game. They judge slowly. They observe instead of chase. They look at patterns, not potential. They value consistency over charisma. What does that give him? Better choices, fewer surprises, less emotional confusion, more alignment with who they actually are, not who they hoped someone would be. A man over 40 isn't guarded, he's discerning. And with that level of clarity, he notices something else about himself, something he used to suppress. 4. Their masculinity is unapologetic. Now, there was a time when men felt pressure to shrink themselves, to soften their tone, to apologize for being direct, to dim their natural assertiveness just to avoid being labeled too much or outdated. Men over 40 don't do that anymore. They've tried the apologetic approach. They've bent themselves into shapes that didn't fit, and they've watched it backfire because pretending to be less than you are doesn't earn respect. It loses it. What changed? They stopped asking permission to be men. They lead without apology, they speak with clarity, they set boundaries without explaining themselves. Not aggressively, just firmly. Here's what that means. A man who's comfortable in his own skin doesn't need constant validation. He doesn't debate his worth. He doesn't perform masculinity. He just is. The reward? Self-respect. Inner stability? A life built on authenticity, not approval. A man over 40 would rather stay single than spend his life pretending to be someone he's not, just to keep the peace. And that's not arrogance. That's alignment. Once he stops apologizing for who he is, a deeper truth comes into focus, especially around how he leads. 5. They won't debate for leadership. Most men spend their younger years thinking leadership in a relationship is something you earn through consensus, that every decision needs approval, that authority comes from negotiation. Men over 40 know different. They've been in relationships where every choice became a debate, where leading felt like lobbying, where clarity was met with resistance instead of trust. And they've learned something critical. A man who has to argue for his role doesn't actually have one. What shifted? They stopped explaining and started embodying. A mature man doesn't justify his decisions. He makes them with calm certainty. He doesn't demand respect. He moves in a way that makes it natural to give. The truth? Partnership should feel like coordination, not competition. And if a man has to constantly defend his judgment in his own relationship, he's not leading. He's performing. What he gains? Peace, flow, a life where direction doesn't require permission and communication doesn't feel like cross-examination. A man over 40 would rather build alone than spend his life convincing someone to let him lead. That's not pride, that's principle. And when leadership stops being a debate, it exposes another old belief men finally let go of. 6. The old happy wife, happy life model failed. For years, men were sold a simple formula. Keep her happy, and everything else will fall into place. Sacrifice your preferences, defer your needs, put her emotions first, always, and the relationship will thrive. Men over 40 tried it, and they watched it collapse. Because what actually happened was this. The more they sacrificed, the less they were respected. The more they deferred, the less attractive they became. The happy wife model didn't create partnership. It created imbalance. And imbalance doesn't build love. It builds resentment. What they learned: a healthy relationship isn't built on one-sided sacrifice. It's built on mutual respect. A man who constantly shrinks himself doesn't become a better partner. He becomes invisible. Now they operate differently. They value balance over appeasement. They prioritize alignment over peacekeeping. They give freely, but not endlessly. The result? Inner stability, self-respect. A life that doesn't revolve around managing someone else's emotional state. A man over 40 would rather stay centered alone than lose himself trying to keep someone else comfortable. That's not selfishness. That's survival. Because the moment he stops sacrificing himself to keep the peace, he sees his value differently. 7. Their value peaked later, and they know it. Society teaches men that youth is everything. That if you're not married by 30, you're behind. That your best years are slipping away. Men over 40 know that's backwards. Because while most men spent their 20s and 30s building their careers, their character, their financial foundation, they were often overlooked, passed over for men who had less substance but better timing. And now they're finally being seen for what they actually bring. What they realized: a man's value doesn't peak at 25, it compounds. Experience, stability, resources, emotional maturity, these things don't decline with age, they increase. And the men who understand this stop operating from scarcity. The shift is clear. They're no longer chasing validation. They're not desperate to prove themselves. They have options now, real ones, and they know it. What that creates? Confidence, leverage, the ability to choose instead of settle. A man over 40 isn't racing against time anymore. He's operating from a position of strength, and that changes everything. When a man knows his worth, his priorities shift, especially in what he looks for next. If this is resonating so far, go ahead and subscribe. It helps the channel grow, and it tells me to keep making videos for men who actually get it. 8. Purpose matters more than pretty faces. When men are young, attraction drives everything. A beautiful face, the right look, the chemistry, it feels like enough. Like that's what a relationship is supposed to be built on. Men over 40 have learned the hard way that it's not, because attraction fades when there's nothing underneath it. Chemistry dies when values don't align. And a pretty face doesn't build a legacy, raise a family, or stand beside you when life gets hard. What they figured out: a woman's character matters more than her appearance. Her vision matters more than her validation. And a man who's serious about his future doesn't choose based on what looks good in the moment. He chooses based on what lasts. Now they see differently. They look for alignment, not just attraction. Substance, not just surface. A partner who adds to their mission, not distracts from it. The payoff? Clarity, focus. A life built on something real instead of something fleeting. A man over 40 doesn't chase beauty anymore. He seeks partnership. And once purpose replaces impulse, standards take on a whole new meaning. 9. They have standards now. Most men spend their younger years accepting whoever shows interest. If she paid attention, that was enough. If she was available, that was a green light. Standards felt like something you couldn't afford when you were just trying to be chosen. Men over 40 flipped that script entirely. They're not waiting to be chosen anymore, they're doing the choosing. And they've built a life clear enough to know exactly what they're looking for and what they're not willing to tolerate. What changed their approach? They stopped treating standards like preferences. Standards became non-negotiables. Respect isn't optional. Peace isn't up for debate. Alignment isn't something you compromise on just because someone is attractive or available. How'd they move now? They observe longer. They qualify harder. They walk away faster when something doesn't fit. What he gains from this? Better connections, less wasted time, relationships that actually match who he is, not who he was pretending to be. A man over 40 doesn't lower his standards to avoid being alone. He raises them to protect his peace. And with real standards in place, he discovers something younger men never understand. 10. They've experienced real peace alone. There's a fear most men carry when they're younger, that being alone means being lonely, that without a partner, life will feel empty, incomplete, like something essential is missing. Men over 40 discovered something that changes everything. That fear was a lie, because they've lived it now. They've experienced what it feels like to come home to silence and actually enjoy it, to make decisions without consultation, to build a routine that works without compromise. And they've realized something profound. Being alone isn't the problem. Being with the wrong person is. What they now understand. Loneliness doesn't come from being single. It comes from being with someone and still feeling unseen. Peace doesn't require a partner. It requires the right environment. And sometimes that environment is solitude. The shift. They stopped fearing being alone and started protecting it. The benefit? Freedom, autonomy. A life that doesn't depend on someone else to feel whole. A man over 40 doesn't avoid being single. He values it because he knows what the alternative costs. The moment solitude stops scaring him, trust, and how he gives it, changes completely. 11. Experience made them discern. First, trust later. Young men give trust easily. They take people at face value. They believe what they're told and move forward on good intentions. It feels optimistic, open, like the right way to approach relationships. Men over 40 don't move that way anymore. Not because they're jaded, because they're educated. They've been lied to. They've been blindsided. They've watched people shift once commitment was secured. And they've learned that trust isn't something you give freely. It's something you confirm slowly. The truth they learned? Words are easy. Patterns tell the truth. Anyone can say the right things for 3 months. But consistency over time? That's rare. That's real. They learn to watch longer than they commit. Test character before they invest emotion. Let time reveal what words can hide. What this protects? Their peace, their resources, their ability to build with someone trustworthy instead of starting over with someone performative. A man over 40 isn't closed off. He's just done gambling on potential. And once trust becomes discernment, the performances he once tolerated become impossible to ignore. 12. They're done performing to impress. There was a phase in every man's life where dating felt like auditioning. Dress right, say the right things, plan the perfect date, perform romance like a rehearsed script just to prove you're worth choosing. Men over 40 walked off that stage. Not because they stopped caring, but because they stopped pretending. They realized that any relationship built on performance dies the moment the performance stops. And they'd rather be single than spend another year acting like someone they're not. Here's what clicked. If she's only interested in the version of you that's trying too hard, she's not interested in you. She's interested in the effort. And effort without authenticity isn't connection. It's exhaustion. So they stopped. They show up as themselves now. Interested but not desperate. Present but not performing. And if that's not enough, they walk. What that brings? Self-respect, energy, relationships that start honest instead of starting impressive. A man over 40 doesn't audition anymore. He shows up, and that's the only offer on the table. That clarity makes the modern dating world look very different, and not always in a good way. 13. The modern dating pool feels like a circus. Dating apps, endless profiles, staged photos, rehearsed bios, everyone performing their best angle, their best life, their best version of a person who may not actually exist. Men over 40 look at that landscape and opt out, not because they can't compete, because they refuse to. They've seen what modern dating has become. Shallow conversations that go nowhere, people treating relationships like shopping, attention spread so thin that commitment feels impossible. They remember when connection happened naturally, when people met through life, not through algorithms, when interest was genuine, not a swipe based on 6 filtered photos and a clever tagline. And they made a choice. If finding someone means performing in that circus, they'd rather not find anyone at all, because the kind of woman worth building with isn't shopping for men online like she's browsing a catalog. So they invest their time differently. Real community, real conversations, real life. The upside? Sanity, dignity, a dating life that doesn't feel like a part-time job. A man over 40 would rather meet no one than meet everyone and find nothing real. So with all that noise in the dating world, men start valuing something they once overlooked. 14. Freedom is a high-value asset. After 40, when you're younger, freedom feels like something you're supposed to outgrow. Like the goal is to trade it in for stability, partnership, a life that looks complete to everyone else. Men over 40 realized freedom isn't something you outgrow. It's something you protect. because they've tasted what it's like to have their time, money, and energy drained by someone who didn't value it. They've felt the weight of obligation without appreciation. They've lived the reality of giving up their freedom for a relationship that gave back frustration. So now they treat freedom like the asset it is. They don't give it away cheaply, and they don't trade it for companionship that costs more than it contributes. They guard their schedule, their space, their peace, not out of selfishness, but out of self-preservation. And if someone wants access to that life, they have to add to it, not subtract from it. What freedom gives him? Control, options, a life built entirely on his terms. A man over 40 doesn't apologize for protecting his freedom. He's earned it. And when freedom becomes an asset instead of a phase, he starts seeing singlehood in a whole new light. 15. Being single doesn't mean being alone. The biggest lie society tells men is that without a romantic partner, your life is incomplete. That being single means being isolated. That if you're not in a relationship, you're somehow less connected, less fulfilled, less whole. Men over 40 see through that completely. Because they've built lives that don't revolve around one person. They have friendships that matter, communities they're part of, purposes they're pursuing, families they're connected to, hobbies that bring joy, work that gives meaning. They learned something critical. Partnership is an addition, not a foundation. A man who needs a woman to feel complete isn't ready for a relationship. He's looking for a solution to a problem only he can solve. So they built themselves complete first, and now a relationship would have to enhance what already works, not fix what's broken. What that creates? Strength, fulfillment, a life that's already rich before anyone else enters it. A man over 40 isn't waiting for someone to complete him. He's deciding if there's room for someone to join him. And that's the difference. So there it is. 15 reasons men over 40 are choosing to stay single. And choosing it with clarity, not confusion. This isn't about giving up on relationships. It's about refusing to settle for the wrong ones. It's about understanding that being single isn't a problem to solve. It's a position of strength to protect. These men aren't running from partnership. They're just not compromising peace, purpose, or freedom for companionship that costs more than it gives. And if the right woman comes along, someone who adds instead of subtracts, someone who aligns instead of competes, they'll know, because they're not desperate anymore. They're discerning. So drop a comment, guess which reason hit the hardest for you. And when you're ready to go deeper, the next video is already waiting. Click it, you'll see why. Stay strong, stay selective, stay single until it makes sense not to be.